Thank you for joining us for Meet the Professionals. This is a video series where we interview a variety of professionals in career paths to find out more about their backgrounds, how they got into their field, and to get advice if you're interested in becoming a member of that field as well. This afternoon, we are talking to Patty Carlson, a flight attendant for Southwest Airlines. Patty has been flying for over 20 years. She lives in Dallas, is married, and has 2 children. Welcome, Patty. Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So let's get started. How did you get started in this profession? What led you to becoming a flight attendant?
Ever since I was a little girl, I always wanted to be a flight attendant. I grew up in an airline family, so I was very lucky to be able to fly for free to many places. And when I was graduating high school, I told my parents that I'm going to be a flight attendant, and they said, "You're going to college first. You need a backup just in case."
Fair.
So I went to Johnson Wales University, which is in Providence, Rhode Island, and went for travel and tourism management.
Oh, excellent.
Yes.
And then right after graduation, did you go right into working?
Nope. So my whole goal was to be a flight attendant, and I, in college, was able to do an internship at one of the Newport mansions, Belcourt Castle at the time it was called, and I was a tour guide. And then we also did another internship with getting a bachelor's at Johnson Wales. You do a lot of internships with different travel organizations. So I worked for Colette Tours, it's now Colette Vacations, and Pawtucket as inside sales and a tour guide. And I enjoyed having those jobs, so I kept them, and I stayed in Rhode Island after graduation. And then I was turning 20, I don't remember if it was 23 or 24. I lost my flying benefits.
Oh no.
Fly for free anymore. And I was like, okay, I now need to become a flight attendant.
Okay.
I wanted to work for TWA, which is what my dad worked for.
Oh wow.
I was not allowed to work for TWA. They're not going to be around much longer, and he was absolutely correct in that. And he told me about this company that was new in the East Coast, Southwest Airlines. They had just started service the year I graduated in 1997 in Providence, Rhode Island. And then they started service in Islip, Long Island in 1999, and that's when I interviewed for them. I went down to New York from Rhode Island and had a group interview, and then 2 individual interviews in November of 99. And they told me I was hired, and I started in training in January of 2000.
Wow. So what did your training look like?
Training was really tough. It was a month long. You, for Southwest, you come down to Dallas and you stay in a hotel. And at the time you had a roommate, which now you don't have a roommate. And you had to basically quit your job, not know if you're going to get hired, and you're not getting paid. You weren't getting paid for training. You had one meal that they gave you during the day, and then you had to take care of yourself the rest of the time. And every day you went into class, you had to be on time or early, otherwise you were out. And it was, we call them the body snatchers. You never knew. You would be sitting in class, the person would be next to you, and you come back from lunch and that person might be gone. You had to, basically every day, training was mainly about emergencies, medical emergencies. It had nothing to do with your day-to-day job. We did not learn how to serve passengers. It was all about the things that you never really want to happen on the airplane. And you needed to get a 90 and above. I think we took a test every other day, and if you failed, you were out. So it was very intense, and basically I don't think anyone heard from me for a month till graduation.
Wow, that's very intense. So then after you went through that month, then graduation, and then what happens after graduation?
Yep, so I graduated in February the 25th of 2000, and they basically put you on an OE trip, which you get to fly with other flight attendants. You're the extra flight attendant. So you're with a crew, and you get to work their positions, one position a flight. So I got to do the A position, which is the flight attendant up front. for Southwest. They do the PAs. They take care of the pilots. And then the C position is the middle of the plane, where you have to brief the emergency exit row, and make sure you're 15 and older and that you can lift 50 pounds. And then the B position's in the back, who takes care of the C and B's galley. And at the time, that was the planes that we had were only 3 flight attendants. Now we have 2 sets of planes, which we have 4 flight attendants on our 800s that sit 175 people. So I had to do that. And then once I passed that and they wrote their little things about me, I had to do a cockpit ride at the time, which they don't do anymore after September 11th. But you would sit up with the pilots and get to see what they're doing, just so you know for your job that, okay, at this time it's critical, you can't really call them. You have to wait until 10,000 feet, because there's a lot of things they're doing for takeoff and landing. And once I did that, then I got my line, and they said, you're based in Chicago. You got to, in training, tell like, there were, I don't even remember how many bases, but probably like 5 to 6 bases you could choose from. And I got Chicago. I'd never been to Chicago before. And it was basically show up in 3 days and try to find a crash pad, because I don't live there. And good luck. And your trip starts at this time. Be there.
Wow. And that time is the time you have to show up at the airport, or do you have to check in ahead of time?
Yes. So for your actual trip, you have to be at the airport an hour in advance. You have to check in. And then for a domestic flight, you need to be at the airplane a half an hour before the plane takes off. And for international flights, we have to be there 45 minutes before, because we have to do security checks, meet our crew. You haven't met the crew yet. Get briefed from the captain. Make sure you have all your provisions for the flight so that we're not thirsty or starving. So yeah, there's a lot of pre-checks going on before the people even make it onto the airplane.
So can you walk us through what your typical work day would look like then, or work week, or a typical flight? What is the standard? Is it a work day, work week? Is it per flight? What does it look like?
That's a good question. So how we do our schedule, we bid a month before. So I already have my schedule for April, because I bid it in March. So in the beginning of April, we bid for May. And the usual schedule is 4 trips in a month. So you would work 3 days on, 4 off, 3 on, 4 off, 3 on, 4 off. But there's also lines that have turns on it. So you could work 5 days in a row, turns, and then have time off. Or you could have 2 days, and that's usually 2 days back to back, which is 4 days in a row. You just have one night at your house. But the good thing about Southwest is, towards the end of the month, we have open time, and you could trade your trips around. So you could get rid of your trips that you wanted to travel to Europe that month. You could get rid of everything. Or I need money, so you could pick up other people's trips and add to your line. Or you could keep the trips you have. And every trip is different. There's really not, it's very rare to get a line that you have the same trip on that line. So a 3-day trip could look anywhere from you're doing 1 leg somewhere, which is rare, to 10 legs somewhere. So a leg is each flight. So I could fly out of Dallas to Houston, Houston, Austin, Austin, Houston, Houston, Dallas, Dallas, Harlingen, wherever, and then end up somewhere that night. Or the nice flights are where you would fly like Dallas to Orlando to Fort Lauderdale, and you're done for the day. Overnights could go anywhere from a 10-hour overnight to, we've had, I think, 26 to 27-hour overnights at some of our places.
Wow.
And then you're gone for 3 days, and you come back on that last day. And each day is different.
So you sort of get to, it sounds like you get to pick and choose your schedule a little bit, like you have some flexibility there.
Oh, yes, we have a ton of flexibility. That's what I love about it. Some airlines, you don't have as much. You have minimums and maximums. So you have to work a certain amount in the month, and you get capped. Where we don't get capped, we just have to, if you wanted to work 6 days in a row, you could. You just needed to be off in between and then work another 6 days in a row.
Wow.
So really flexible for people who are overzealous and love to work, and people who, want to take some time off. And I started this job in my 20s. I was single. I didn't have anything that I needed to be home for, so I worked a lot. And then I got married, and I was able to kind of not work as much. And then I had kids. And I had friends who would, when I was pregnant, say, when are you going to quit your job? And I'm like, I'm never quitting my job. You have a job that you could stay at home and raise your kids, and then when you're ready, you could go back to work.
Mm-hmm.
Not people say they have that job, and I could say I have that job. So I was able, my kids are now 11 and 9, and from the time they were little, I stayed home with them. And if I wanted to pick up a trip with a friend, I did, and I was able to get rid of my trips and raise them. And now I'm starting to slowly go back to work again.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need me as much, and it's good for me too to have my alone time in my hotel room without someone barging in the bathroom or in my bed or whatever.
I sound like a really great perk. It sounds like you love that. But what do you like the best about your job? Is it the flexibility? And also, what do you like the least about your job right now?
I love that I am able to, the flexibility, absolutely. And that I am able to be, basically the way I choose my trips, I choose them where I could see my friends from college, or I could come home to New York and see my family. Got Islip overnights or New York City overnights and hang out with my friends there. That's pretty much what I base my trips on. Or like some of our trips have where we're in Punta Cana at an all-inclusive for 27 hours. So why not be on vacation for that amount of time? So I love that. And sometimes you cannot get rid of your trips. You try and you can't, so you miss things. And that's one thing that I don't like about it, is that if there's something going on here, I want to be here for my kids and I don't want to miss out. So that is one thing, with our job, we're not home. So when we're gone and we miss things. But I'm not gone as much as a normal job would be gone. Or I'm able to pick my kids up from school, drop them off at school when I'm here, and I'll be there. So
that does sound wonderful. The flexibility is so great. So moving on to some more questions. So you sort of touched on this a little bit, but can you live and work anywhere that you want, or are you required to be in a certain location? You said for training was in one location, and then afterwards you got to pick where you wanted to be. How does that work exactly?
So you can live anywhere. I have friends who live in Australia, who live in London, Germany, and they commute in for their trips. So they'll bunch their trips up. Oh, and Honduras. I have a bunch of friends all over the place. It's wonderful. And it's such a flexible job. So they fly in and work their trips, and then they fly home to wherever they live. So you have at Southwest, there's bases that you have a supervisor at. And then when you do recurrent training every year, even if you don't work the whole year, even if you worked a billion days that year, you need to go to recurrent training to brush up on CPR, emergencies. They talk about things that might have happened that year with airlines, that what's changed, everything's always changing in this industry. So once a year, you do have to either go to your base, or so I live in Dallas, but I'm based out of Chicago because I have better seniority in Chicago. I would go up to Chicago, or I could trade into Dallas to do recurrent training. So that's flexible too, where if I have friends in Denver, I could fly to Denver and fly with them out of their base. If I want to, you could fly out of anywhere. I have a girlfriend who lives in Orlando. We have a base in Orlando, and we have a ton of trips now out of LA that go to Hawaii. So she commutes to LA. She gives away her trips in Orlando, commutes to LA to fly the Hawaii trips so that she could hang out in Hawaii for an overnight.
That's awesome.
I mean, when you say flexible, it's really flexible. You could use your this job any way you want. Some people never use the travel benefits. Other people travel all over the place. They're never home. On their days off, they're somewhere new, running around, because we fly for free on our airline. If you're married, your significant other flies for free, your kids fly for free, and your parents fly for free. That's all benefits with this. And then you get discounts on other airlines. It's non-repping, so you may or may not get a seat, but it's at a price that you could go to Europe for $100.
Wow.
You can see places you never normally would see if you're paying a regular price as a regular person.
Yeah.
So there's lots of benefits in having this job.
That is really awesome. I mean, plane tickets are so expensive these days. Yeah.
Hence why I became the flight attendant finally after I lost my benefits.
I want to go back and talk a little bit about the training and the certifications. You mentioned CPR training. So what other certificates do you need, or training are you required to go through in order to stay a flight attendant?
So you need to be 20 years old to become a flight attendant, and they just really want you to have a high school diploma, and then if you have some college, that's always good, but you do not need a college degree. And a lot of people that were in my class or that I know got their college degree after they became a flight attendant, because you have so much flexible time. You could go to school on off or on your overnights. Now that school's online, it's much easier nowadays than it was when I started. But so basically, you really just good people skills, a great personality. You have to be able to multitask and be able to diffuse situations before they become really bad. And I don't know, geography is probably good, knowing where you're going.
That is probably important. One of my other questions was, do you have to learn the new cities when you're traveling to them if your routes are changing?
Yes. So if anyone does decide to become a flight attendant, one of the best things I could advise you is that when you are going to training, before you go, they're going to send you the city codes of where they fly and the PAs, because you're supposed to memorize the PAs. That was another thing in my class, that if you said A instead of the, you failed the PA. You had to redo it because you put A instead of the, or just the littlest thing.
What is a PA?
Welcome aboard, Southwest Airlines flight.
Oh, okay, the announcement.
You were going to San Diego. So yeah. And we have an emergency PA, opening PA, a closing PA, put your seatbelt on PA. Every kind of PA.
And they have to be so specific, you have to get them exact.
Yes. When I was in training, you did. And we weren't allowed to read them. Now we can read them, but to get through training, you need to know what you're actually talking about in the PA. So, yeah, so those two things. And then just knowing the history of the airline. I don't know. It's not that it's easy, but they give you all the materials you need to do. You just need to do it. And if you do it, you're fine. It's the people that, unfortunately, we had a friend that went to training and he didn't believe us about the city codes and whatever. And the first day they had a test and he failed it. And they let him stay, but he couldn't fail another test or he was kicked out. So we didn't hear from him that whole month, because he, at that point, was like, oh, okay, it is really serious. Like, I should have studied this before I came down here, type thing. And then they teach you CPR and just any aspect about medical emergencies and evacuating the planes. That's pretty much all of training. And then the last day is 5 minutes of, this is how you serve a drink and what you're actually going to do every day of your life. And hopefully everything else we learned, you will never have to do on the airplane.
Yeah, you never want to have to use that emergency stuff. So what opportunities for advancement are there, if any?
So some flight attendants become in-flight managers, which is an advancement. And then that's like when I go to my base, I have someone who is my manager if I need to talk to them. Because basically we're our own boss on the airplane. There's no one watching over you, or if you have a question, there's no one there on the airplane that you could ask. So you have supervisors in your bases that help you with that. And you could do that, but you're not flying, you're on the ground. So now you're working a regular job, which I think it's like the hours are 6 a.m. and then they leave at 9 or 10, obviously within an 8-hour increment, but it's, a full 7 days because we fly 7 days. So we need someone there that whole time. Or you could move within the company. There's always positions. Like a lot of people move into being a flight attendant from being a ramp agent or an ops agent, operational agent, which is who loads the plane, or a customer service agent, a reservations agent. So they'll get in the company within that job and then move up to being a flight attendant. But yeah, it's very flexible. You can apply for any number of jobs, and there's so many different positions that I didn't even realize before I became a flight attendant.
Mm-hmm.
Airline companies. There's something for everyone, pretty much.
That's great. Yeah, that's good to hear. Are certain times of the year busier than other times for you?
No, I feel like it's busy now.
Yeah.
After COVID, everyone's like, I need out of the house.
Gotta go somewhere, gotta do something.
I don't even think there's a downtime anymore. It's always busy, in my opinion. I mean, some cities could be less busy than others, but most of our flights have been full from when I worked.
Wow.
So everyone's taking advantage of the flights being back and running,
yeah,
going places.
Just want to pivot a little bit towards advice for students who are considering this field. Thinking about some of the classes that teens are taking, when we have tutoring upstairs, one of the things that we always hear is like, am I ever going to use this math in my life? Am I ever going to need this science class? Is there anything that you do use or you don't use in terms of English, math, foreign language, science, anything that teens should focus on if they want to go this route?
Yes. So we started flying to Cuba and San Juan, Puerto Rico, a lot. We're opening up a lot in South America. And so we have a flight attendant on the plane who is bilingual and speaks Spanish and English for those flights. And they get paid extra. So if you know another language, and this goes for any airline, like United looks for German speakers, French speakers, because they go everywhere in Europe. So you need all these different languages. If you have another language, that is a plus. You would probably be put above other people in getting the flight attendant position. Mm-hmm. And with math, we do sell alcohol on the plane. So back in the day, we just took cash and we had to count up the cash and we had to drop it at the city we were at in I don't know, I guess a little bank thing, where now we have an iPad that you just swipe the credit card, which is very nice. We've come a long way in 20 years. But I guess you still need math in that sense where you're adding up what people have to make sure it equals what you sold out of your liquor kits and things like that.
Okay. Another question that I had that I skipped over before was, has technology changed the way you do your job other than the credit card machine? Has technology improved any bits of it?
Oh, yes. It's when I started, we had to bid on paper bids to get the next month. So it was a process. You would have to go through each line and try to figure out what you wanted and bid to your seniority. And back when I started, I was probably, I don't even know, like the 2000th flight attendant. So I'd have to bid 2,000 lines. So yes, technology has really helped tremendously now from the past. We had a lot of things. If you wanted to trade trips with other people, you had to leave a note to them, like, I would like to trade for your trip next month. And then they would leave you a note, and then you'd have to go to the supervisor who would help trade your trip to their, I don't know. It was a lot. Oh, and we had beepers back then too, because we had cell phones were new. So you had a beeper. If this is another thing I didn't mention, when you're new as a flight attendant, you usually are on reserve, which you get paid for your reserve days. But what reserve means is you don't have a trip yet. But if someone like I had a trip and I called in sick, they would call you and you would fly my trip. And that was what the beepers were used for back in the day. They would beep you and say you need to be at the airport 2 hours in advance and come fly this trip, or sit airport standby. So you would sit at the airport for 6 to 8 hours just in case someone calls in or something happens where they need you to fly. Where nowadays cell phones and our manuals were paper manuals. They were gigantic. And every time you had a revision, you had to rip papers out and put papers in. They probably weighed 45 pounds. I don't know. They were gigantic. Took up a lot of space in your bag. And now that's all on our iPad. So we have our manual on our iPad. We have all these, the drinks where you do your drink orders and where you check in. You could check in on your iPad if you're at the airport, which is nice because they had check-in phones that you had to go to check in. I'm really aging myself. Anyway, yes, technology has helped tremendously with our job.
Going back towards the advice, are there any part-time jobs you'd recommend, or internships or extracurricular activities that would be good for teens to help them get a sense of what it would be like to be a flight attendant, or a leg up in the application process?
Yeah, I mean, I believe that to be a customer service agent or something, you could do any of those jobs part-time, like a ramp agent, where you're just getting your foot in the airline and seeing what's going on, or even just a part-time job at the airport where you're watching everything and seeing, is this something I want to do? I really, going to Johnson Wales University helped me a lot, because to get your associates, we had to work in all different aspects. So I got to be a travel agent. I worked at the convention center. I worked at a museum. We worked at the TF Green Airport as the information booth. So you got to see all the different things that have to do with travel, cruise ships, hotels, I don't know, just everything. Because you just never know. You might pivot to something else and feel like this might not be the job for you, but this looks great over here.
Question. It's pretty open-ended, but any words of advice for anyone who wants to go this route? Is there anything that you wish you had known when you started?
Follow your dreams, and if you want to do it, you're gonna make it happen. Being a flight attendant, it's hard to get into it. It's hard at first, but once you're in it, it is the easiest job. It is so fun, and it's an easy job that you should not make hard. If that makes sense.
It does. Sometimes people try to overcomplicate things, and it doesn't.
Yes, that's exactly it.
Okay. Any last things that you want to share that we didn't touch on about your job?
I'm always available too. If anyone that is watching this has any questions about anything that maybe I did not touch on, I am always available to talk or to walk you through the process of applying. Nowadays, you apply online. Like Southwest has, where you put your resume on their webpage and you put that I'm interested in this job, and they will reach out to you and say, we're going to be hiring. And then it's crazy where you all get on, everyone that wants it gets on at the same time and is trying to submit that resume. So it's a little stressful compared to when I interviewed. But it's really worth it once the process is done. It's so much fun. It's such a great job. You meet so many people from so many different walks of life. You hear about all the crazy stuff on the news, but that's like 3% of what happens on the flight. It's usually wonderful, wonderful people, and all these people from different backgrounds coming from different places and learning about where they live or where they're traveling to. It's just amazing.
That sounds fantastic. One last question that I just thought of. If you go through the application process and say you don't get selected the first time, can you keep applying until you do get selected, or is there a limit on how often you can apply?
No, there's not a limit. You definitely should apply again because unfortunately it happens a lot. The best flight attendants, most of them had to try a few times to get into training. But once you're in, it's completely worth it. So.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Patty, for broadening our understanding of your field. And thank you to everyone who is watching. If you have any questions, feel free to email us at teams@levitttown.pl.org and we'll get you in touch. Please visit our YouTube page for more videos in this series.